I took some notes on some things I want to make sure we covered, but I want to hear all of your questions. So I'll kind of give you an idea of what I'm going to make sure that I cover. The day-to-day of running a private practice, what that looks like, the skills needed outside of therapy, some of the challenges and rewards, the steps to start a practice or to get engaged in a group practice, the limitations as an LMSW versus when you're an LCSW, and then supervision expectations while you're in private practice. So I'd love to hear what brought you guys here in the first place. Like, what are some of the things that you'd be interested in about private practice versus agency work off the bat?
I think like flexibility of schedule.
Like, yeah, that's huge. What else?
Something slower pace. I used to do community mental health, and that takes a toll. So just having more control of my own caseload and the clients that I see.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so have all of you done at least one practicum or multiple? Where are you at? Field experience.
I'm doing a practicum, my first one.
Same. Okay.
I haven't yet, but
Okay.
social work.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool.
I'm in my practicum right now, and then I've had experience.
Okay. Cool.
I'm actually a staff member at UT, so I have my LMSW, but I am taking my LCSW exam next month.
Yay.
So yes, this is good timing.
Yes, that's great. That's great. Okay, so I'll tell you a little bit about my background first. So I went to FSU's School of Social Work for my MSW, and I was already working from both my BSW and MSW. I did some work that counted as my clinical practice, which was great. And I was working in an outpatient methadone, Suboxone medication assisted treatment program that was funded by the state. And then I also did an intervention program. So it was outpatient on a, hi, welcome, on a lower tier, lower intensity scale or PIT6. We had like their first, hi, come in. What brings you here? We went around and said what you're looking, why you're interested in.
Okay, let's see. I just got my C license this month, and I'm hoping to start private practice next month.
Oh my
But this is all new. I don't know if everybody went. I went to social work school at the old building. Okay. I don't know how long this one's been here, but anyway, that's what I was.
We just moved in May,
Okay,
so it's
okay.
brand new, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, classes aren't here, but our administrative offices and faculty offices are here, and then the student conference.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
like the
Thank
old
you.
ones.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm just sharing a little bit about my background, what led me to private practice. I didn't start out in it. So yeah, I started in substance abuse, and then I worked with folks who were HIV positive and either recently homeless or had a threat of homelessness through Ryan White funding. And so that was a whole different ballgame, working with the financial aspect of having a clinical relationship and then having to navigate, if somebody was going to be approved for funding or not. A lot of paperwork in that role, and a lot of home visits for that one. And then I worked in the detox facility as well, and working with addiction. And that was a lot of biopsychosocial, because people are coming in and out really quickly. So a lot of clinical work, but it was very short-term care. And then I went to the VA and worked at the VA with the HUD-VASH program, which is a chronic homeless program for people to be permanently housed through a team model. And it was really, really cool because we had social workers, peer support, nurses, doctors, all on the same team for each of our veterans. And so you felt like and we could use cars on the facility to get to those clients, bring them to medical appointments. So it felt like you could break down any barriers to get the veteran to what they needed. It was a really, really unique experience. And so obviously engaging in a lot of clinical work because you're spending a lot of time with time. I mean, we're going to get groceries and but you're always wearing that clinical hat. But we weren't meant to be doing therapy. It was case management, but you're obviously using a lot of clinical work as well. So being at the VA was wonderful and I love it. I highly recommend it. And it was really tricky with I got pregnant and I was doing home visits. So trying to drive around, I'd just be like pausing on the side of the road, getting sick, having, trying to pump all the, it was a mess the first year. And then every time when you work for the government, if you need 15 minutes off, it's like, you got to write a letter to Congress to, be able to take some time off. So I knew that was exactly what you guys mentioned, flexibility and the ability to manage how much I'm taking on at a different time. And just at least for that season is why I decided to go into private practice. And I don't know if that's what I'll do forever, but now that I'm in it, I really love it. So I started my own practice, got licensed, and once I got licensed, and I was able to grow it into a group practice now. So I've got 7 other therapists on my team, and I'll tell you guys a little bit about how that goes. But just so you have an idea, I've done the agency thing, and now I've been in the private practice world since 2018. Yeah, so 6 years, so 2017, 2018. And just grew into group practice in these last few years. And now I'm fully virtual. I've done the in-person thing, I've done the combo, and now I'm fully virtual. And that really came out of COVID, because I've actually been in e-therapy since 2011. I took an e-therapy course back in 2011 because my clinical supervisor from college just happened to be a huge advocate for it, and about reaching folks in rural areas, and especially when I worked with that medication assisted treatment program, making sure that clients who only were coming in for maybe once a month to get their medication, they were still able to receive services, but not have to come all the way downtown every time. So that's kind of cool that I got exposed to it really early, and now it's become so common. So I've always been a big advocate for it. I see how there is a lot of beauty in getting to be face to face and getting to be in the same space. I do love that. And there are so many benefits of it as well. I love that my clients can be with their pets. It's huge for so many of them to be able to be comforted by their animal, to be comforted in their own space. A lot of teens really love being in their own rooms, having their, cozy something, their lovey, their, even just being in the comfort of their own home. You can tell it makes a difference in them being able to open up. And then to be able to show me things that are meaningful to them. I think especially for teens, that when I'm doing my intake, I like for them to be able to get out stuff that matters to them, show me some of the pictures of you and your friends, and some of the, like things that are sitting out on their desk, and why they had it, why that, political signs up on their wall. And, it's a way to really get a cool window into what their life is like outside of the therapy room. So I really enjoy that. And then from a personal perspective, I'll say having a virtual practice is amazing, because if somebody no shows, I just go throw in a little laundry, or I feed myself, or it's so much more manageable this way. I notice that I don't experience as much resentment for those things that naturally shift. I'm like, we're just, of course, I am really big on maintaining my cancellation policy and things like that. But when those things do happen, I know that I've got other use for my time. It's not like I'm stuck at the office just twiddling my thumbs. So I really like that for myself personally. Okay, so we've already touched on why private practice would be helpful, is the independence and the flexibility, being your own boss, setting your own schedule. But when you're first graduating, you'll be a part of a group practice, or you'd be working for someone else when you're an LMSW, or when you're an MSW. You would need to go through. Do you guys already know about the process of getting your LMSW and getting your doing your LMSW exam? Okay, great. Just making sure that y'all already knew that piece. That's
Yeah,
great.
they have they come to us for all the resources. We have like the exam guides, and the online practice tests.
I love it. I'm so excited to see how many resources you guys provide. I felt like a deer in the headlights coming out and of my college time, and just going, what's next? So especially when I did part of it virtually, I think this is just really cool. You guys have so many resources. But in a sense, you still do have, a boss then if you're working for group practice. So one of the big differences is if you're going to be a 1099 or W-2. So from a tax perspective, it's all about how much do you still get to set your own hours, set your own rates. People would say that you can be an LMSW and be a 1099, but you cannot accept direct payment and have your own practice. So that's the big distinction that I want to make sure you guys know. And that can sometimes be misinterpreted. And there are states that do allow that, but Texas isn't one of them. So you do need to be under someone else, an LCSW's practice or a licensed person's practice. It could be an LPC. I'm from Florida, so or I got my degree in Florida and I have my license in both states. So we have all these other acronyms that all get thrown off. But we've got LMHC instead of LPC. We do it's registered clinical social worker intern instead of LMSW. Why did they do that? Why did they do that? And you can't even say RCSWI. It's like this long, they don't want you to shorten it. An intern makes it sound like they're still in school, you know, but but so I really like that you guys could do LMSW here. So yeah, it's a great thing as an LMSW that you can set your own hours and kind of things if you have that set up. But some of the drawbacks from that are then you're, having to pay your own taxes on whatever you, so you just have to be conscious of making sure you set that money aside. You're paying attention to that as the year goes by. And you're, marketing for yourself. You're actively trying to get your own clients for yourself. And I think that those are actually really beneficial things to have as an LMSW because those are skills you're going to need to have in the long term whenever you do decide to have your own practice. And then as a W-2, if you're an employee, then you can kind of more expect that those referrals are coming to you directly and that somebody else could set your hours, somebody else could set your pay. So that just means you're losing a little bit of that flexibility. But of course, it is still a lot different than being in some agency settings. I've felt very overwhelmed and in some I haven't. So I don't think that we can make I've also heard the same thing from private practices. Some group practices could really overwhelm you. So I don't want to make it just agency versus private practice is all that or the other. But I feel like in general, there tends to be a focus on making sure you have a good balance when you're in private practice because you can get burnout. And I think if you find a group practice owner that hopefully you connect with and feel like you're on the same page, hopefully they would really respect and want you to have the self-care that's needed for you to be a great clinician. That's something that's really big in my practice, and I try and bring up regularly in supervision. Is how can you be making sure you're taking care of yourself and setting boundaries for yourself around how many clients you see a day, around making sure you're getting the type of client that you do want that's not completely draining, that's really life-giving for you. There's the financial potential in private practice is usually greater. I will say there are definitely like the VA was the best consistent pay that I experienced being in a different part of the field, but being able to either take insurance or self-pay makes a big difference. I do take insurance. That's just a value for me that I've decided is important to be able to hold, like have a higher self-pay rate for those that can do that and then still have insurance offered, because there's so many people in that middle ground that don't qualify for Medicaid services. We're in some of the places that I worked before and then can't possibly afford the self-pay rate of $200 an hour. And I think I fall in that category of going, my goodness, I can't imagine every week doing that for a few $100s, or especially if there's multiple family members. So I'm really grateful that we can offer insurance coverage, but I will warn you guys, insurance is a beast, and it is not common that a lot of private practitioners that could not do it don't do it. It is, or still do it, because it is a lot to put up with. There have been many times where I've really wrestled with, do I still want to keep doing this? And at the end of the day, it's that value keeps winning out. And it's not to say that at some point, if it takes enough from me, that I won't, but that could be, we could have a whole other talk on insurance and how to work with that. But there is the ability to at least set your own rate, which is huge.
As an LMSW, can you accept insurance?
Yeah, so I'm gonna talk a little bit more about this too, what it's misinterpreted a lot of times. You really can't, as an LMSW, you can't ever put in a claim for yourself. It's very weird. It feels fraudulent, but it's not. It's totally legitimate to do supervisory billing, where you as the LMSW are seeing the client and then you're under the supervision of the person who actually submits the claim, but only certain insurances do allow this. So Aetna and Cigna do allow this. Optum does not. So that includes United, Oscar, Oxford, a lot of those. And that has been one of those ongoing. I do consultation for a lot of other private practitioners, and that comes up a lot, where people think that they can bill, some of those insurances and cannot, unfortunately. I hope that that changes, though. I hope that all of them eventually do. Medicaid, you also can. And I believe Blue Cross Blue Shield can, but I don't work with them, so I don't know directly, but I've heard that you can, so you'd have to look into that one directly. And it's really about your particular contract with that company. So even like me saying that, you would want to make sure that your supervisor has directly made sure that their contract allows for that. And you know, I personally, and this is just like a general little tip when you get into this, anytime that I call, you know, BHAC, or I call the NASW, or I call the insurance, I like to write down when I spoke with someone, their name, what they said. So I've got it on file that I can say, they said I can do supervisory billing at this time on that day, if that ever were to come up. You have something to, got that recorded call that you can rely on. Any other questions about that?
I'm just super curious and totally from as an outsider of you know, in social work, like how, so if a client comes in and they say I'm on Blue Cross Blue Shield and or one of the ones that doesn't do supervisory billing, like how does that then determine which person that client sees?
Yeah. So for example, if someone came in and said, I take United, I can see them because I'm in
Right.
network with United. But I couldn't, if they wanted to see Hannah, they couldn't because she's not licensed with her C yet, so she couldn't.
Right,
Yep.
okay.
And so I actually used to work on like the startup side for one of these like group practices at scale.
Yeah.
And so did a lot of the stuff you're talking about.
Oh, cool.
But I was wondering how the increase of those group practices impacts your business, and
Mhm.
also like as someone who was a director of growth at one of these startups and like dealt with it, you know, we basically, you know, had our operations team separate, our clinical team all separate. But if you're one person, like, are you the one like setting up meetings with Optum and all of them, like, and how much of your time does that take in order to set it up?
It is so what I was gonna get to is that the business side of this is a full-time job. And so if you want to be in private practice, you really have to be ready to own a business and use a lot of other hats that with a lot of different roles that we didn't necessarily take on as in social work school. You know, because we learn how to be both case managers and clinicians. And I think the case management role, I really feel like, let's do as social workers, we do get more of this training than probably in other therapeutic degrees. But because we know how to use a lot of those organizational skills to case manage, but there's a lot. I don't like this marketing thing. It's so hard for me. It's so uncomfortable, but it's such an important part, you know, having to hold boundaries with fees and cancellation policy and all those things. Yes, there's something very therapeutic embedded in that, but it is a really tough thing to match with a social worker that I went into a helping profession. So you really have to be able to hold, and I think that's why I'm good at this, is I have to use both sides of my brain all the time, and really hold both the professionalism and the therapeutic skills that I have. The answer to your question about the way that impacts smaller businesses, I'm sure it does, but I just don't see it. I mean,
you don't feel like it impacts you.
I don't see the impact necessarily. I mean, we get tons of, I was able to really quickly grow my own practice. I think that a huge piece is having confidence in your skill set and demonstrating that to the people that you do consultations with. And I felt like for lack of a better word, like kind of that close of the sales call, you know, that initial call, like, I know that I'm a good fit for what you told me that you need, and I'm going to be able to meet those needs. I'm doing those consultation calls also wondering, are you going to be the kind of client that I want to take on too, and not just holding a stance of, I want to try and sell myself to you, and like, do you think I'm the right fit for you? It's a two-way thing, and really feeling like that, really feeling confident that if I take on a client that is looking for something skills that I don't have, it's not going to feel good for me either. So I'm looking to see, do I want to take on this client too? It's a two-way street. And I think that's really helped me fill up, to the caseload that I want, and the kind of caseload that I want. And then that's been more challenging for different personalities. I think if you come in really nervous and unsure of yourself, it's going to be even harder to like fill up your caseload. And that's also part of just being experienced and having more time in the field too, because you can't really feel confident if you've never done it before, right? But you can at least feel confident that I'm going to give you the, the best I can, or whatever you guys have learned in your practicum, bringing that into it. But I think probably a lot of the metrics on that, I wouldn't really have access to knowing like how many of those calls on or those searches on Google are going to those companies, and then I just never see them, so I just don't know that we're not getting those referrals.
No, but I think the fact that you're saying that you're like, I don't know, I don't see it, goes to show like there is so much demand.
Yes.
And even though there are these group practices at scale and people growing businesses, like a small business owner can still thrive given like you're presenting the right way in terms of like your own skills as well as like marketing yourself. So I mean that's great to hear. That's the short of it.
Yeah,
But-
and I relied on some search engine support. Having our website now more recently has been really helpful, but then I really relied on some other than Psychology Today. Like I've used other programs like Alma. I'm a huge fan of Alma. And they don't let pre-licensed individuals on there. But there are things like that have been huge that I think without that I would probably struggle with finding referrals, if there weren't some of those larger referral directories to be sending people through. I think just by word of mouth it would be a struggle. So yeah, I probably would see it then more.
Could I say something about your question too? It's interesting. I think there's kind of this mix that's happening now with software and private practice, because like a friend of mine just started taking insurance and Simple Practice. I don't know if you guys. Yeah, and so it's like all in there too. So it's not just like these big conglomerates or like sometimes the private practice is using that to help too. So and you can hire people to get you panels and stuff. She was fine because I was like, okay, never do all that paperwork.
I definitely would recommend outsourcing and consulting with other people just as much as possible. I think that there are way more of those options now. I wish that I would have even, there probably were some places like that, but I just didn't know about them. But because of technology and the way we can all get so much easier connected now, it's so much easier to find support with billing, like just hiring out some support for billing for insurance, or hiring out for administrative support part-time without having to hire like a full-time admin. You can hire out for a year, then outsource marketing or social media, things like that. But all that adds up, so it's a really tough balance from the business side of how much you want to outsource. But I do think at least when you start up and you try and get your processes in order, it's really helpful to look outside of yourself and your skill set. Because here we are with all this clinical knowledge. It's helpful to look out to some people who are experts in that area and get some input on how they would suggest that you brand or suggest that you deal with insurance and try to streamline things. Yeah, it's really I've really benefited a lot from reaching outside of myself for support in these last few years in particular. Okay, so what else? Other reasons to huge reason to be in private practice, that you can specialize in what you really want to specialize in. Personally, if you want to have it's funny though, I think over the course of time, what I love about social work, and I'm always when they're debating, should I go this route or the psychology or social, I'm always saying the thing is we have these hopefully long careers and you have so many options within social work to reach so many different populations, and what I thought I would be focusing on is not what I'm focusing on, and so that can transform over time. And I like that if you get burnt out in one area, you can always go to a different area and you can pivot, within your own private practice, and especially because you're in charge, but even when you're in a group practice, you could name for yourself, this is the population that I would really ideally like to work with. Or you can decide for yourself if you want to brand more based on the modality that you're really well equipped with versus the population that you really want to work with. Another way that you can brand something that a lot of people in my practice have aligned with is, I really like that of being outcome driven. So something that we hear our clients say a lot are things like, I've done therapy before, but I've never seen a really dramatic shift. And because we're big on having these evidence-based tools where most of us are EMDR trained and youth IFS is some unique tool. We don't want you coming in and just feeling like you're chatting the whole time or just, having a conversation and then and there's nothing wrong with talk therapy, but if they're coming in feeling already disappointed, I've been to therapy before and that talk therapy thing didn't do enough for me, does for some people. We're hoping that you get tools, like you really get to use some modalities that give you the outcome that you're wanting. So those are some ways you can market yourself that don't necessarily mean I've got these big letters by my name that say I've got this certain skill set, or then you're not in this niche. Like I only work with anxiety or I only work with depression. You could still market yourself in another way like that. Another thing that I specifically focus on is I work with a lot of therapists and other like helping professionals. So a lot of people, when they're therapists, they go to therapy and we've witnessed a lot of and we receive and observe a lot of trauma, and we're having to constantly regulate throughout sessions, and then we still have our own personal lives. And so if somebody goes to therapy as a therapist, a lot of times they tell me their therapist feels really awkward and they're, asking them, was that okay? Do you want to do this? Or, there's some discomfort that's shared. And so I've had people tell me, I didn't tell them I was a therapist because I didn't want them to treat me differently. Or I didn't want them to be, but I specifically cater to working with therapists because I love it. I feel really confident in it. And I'm like, I know what that's like to know, yes, I can regulate here in session, and then I can go be a human at home and still make mistakes and still, struggle with how to handle a situation in my personal life that I may be able to, support you in managing. So I really like that as a niche, like caring caregivers or helping professionals. You can think about it in that way too. Somebody that's a helping professional could be dealing with trauma, but somebody who's a helping professional could be dealing with depression. But that still is a way for you to market to a niche without saying it's only this one issue, only this one diagnosis. Any questions about that, about like finding your niche? And I really struggled with that because I didn't like the idea of really shrinking down into being one thing. So we have these four, as a practice, we have these four pillars, OCD and anxiety, trauma, the EMDR, IFS lens of use, the helping professionals and caregivers. I'm blanking. Oh, maybe because and couples, because I really do love working with couples, but I'm not like making a whole couple therapy person. I have a couple of folks on my team who focus on that. So but there are still ways you can kind of make pillars of it instead of it just being one thing too.
I guess I was going to ask, like in building a group practice, how much are you doing that together around kind of like vision and setting those pillars? What does that process look like? And like, how much is joining a group practice, or you started your own, like, how much is that around shared values versus kind of like logistics and convenience, if that makes sense?
Yeah, well, I think it really depends on which way you want to. Some people decide whatever their niche is who they're going to hire. Whereas I've taken the route of hiring people who have a variety of interests, so that not anyone who walks through the door is able to be seen by someone under our umbrella, but most concerns that are brought to our attention are able to be addressed by somebody there. Like somebody that focuses, a couple of people that focus on teen, and a couple of people that focus on couples, a couple of people that focus on adults. That way there's, we're able to not be fighting over referrals or any concern like that. But there is a benefit to doing it both ways. And then it depends on if you're going to have W-2s or 1099s is a big part of it, because like for me, when I have some 1099s, I'm making my vision for my practice, and then they're participating in it for however long, they contract with me, but really they can have their own vision for what they want their own practice to look like, especially if they end up branching off on their own. I come from the mindset that personally, I want my LMSWs to learn how to do all this stuff. I want them to know how to deal with insurance, how to know how to deal with billing, how to know how to market, how to know how to, deal with all the policy making and all that, so that when they become LCSWs, I'm not naive enough to think they're not going to want to have 100% of the pie. Like, why wouldn't they want that? Except when they know how much work it is to deal with the business side. And if they decide then, I don't want to deal with that headache okay, I'm just gonna stay on board so I can, and in our case, we increase the percentage when somebody becomes an LCSW, or their version of the license. But I think it's really naive, unfortunately, in our field, that so many group practice owners think that somebody's gonna wanna, be under you forever and ever, and that it's like a shock that they're gonna wanna take their clients to move on elsewhere. My hope is that someone will participate for at least the agreed amount of time that, like, in a contract. But ultimately, for the sake of the client, like for best continuity of care, I believe in those clients staying with that therapist and then moving on. And the whole battle over clients thing is a really unfortunate thing within our field. It gets icky and it just doesn't, it's just not good client care to me. And unfortunately, I don't think I think it's part of being in business. You're going, oh, but I've invested in you. I get it. But after somebody's already, put in their time, and hopefully they've learned a lot. Hopefully they want to keep, working for your practice and not have to deal with, all the insurance things and all that. But I want to be able to be excited for them that, like, look at this thing that we learned together and you're now able to go be independent. So that's something I would just encourage you guys when you do find a group practice. I'd encourage you to, from the beginning, have, be careful, obviously, but have some more candid conversations about what you actually want in the long term. If they know when you're walking through the door at day one of, you have 2 years at least of being an LMSW, they know, okay, I'm going to give you these 2 years, but ultimately I want to have my own practice. If they know that that's your goal and you're like, I really want to learn this business stuff, that gives them potentially the opportunity to teach you some of those skills that you could then have one day in your own business. And it gives you a less awkward conversation when you're gonna hit that exit, as opposed to kind of pretending like you're gonna be around forever and then it being a shock to everyone. I'd rather have like some more openness about it. It's still your career. You still don't wanna, you don't wanna risk some tension in that. I get it, but I think that there are a lot more people open to that now, to an understanding of that. Any questions?
You mentioned the previous question you asked about, does anyone have questions about like specialties, etc.
Yeah.
When because you spent a while in agencies and things like that, but I'm wondering, like, if you go as an LMSW directly into a group practice, like you never go to the agency side, how do you start building those pillars or building your like your expertise, let's put it that way, when you're coming out as an LMSW. And I feel like most of the program here, they very much teach us to be generalists. So how did you navigate that, and how do you, I guess, work with folks that you bring on board to your practice out of social work masters to help them kind of figure out their niche?
No, I figured out my niche this year. It took me, I was just leaning into the generalist practitioner model for a long time because I was full, and so it was fine and it worked. And then I found I love working with moms and daughters. Okay, I love working with other therapists. Okay, I love working with OCD. And there were so many things that I really did enjoy. And then there were a lot of things that I said, I really don't feel skilled working with personality disorders. That is not my area of expertise. That is not what I want to go after, in marketing. So it was a matter of time and experience of working with a variety of clients and knowing which sessions did I leave and feel drained, which sessions did I leave and feel kind of dumbfounded with where to go. And those give me opportunities to hopefully you guys then go, oh, I'm going to consult with someone else and get some info. So it's not that all of those mean that those are not the people that you work with. Hopefully you do consult and then come back a better practitioner for the next session. But then I noticed the ones that we made tons of progress, and I felt that excitement. I can pretty much tell now on a consultation call. I can tell on a consultation call that we're a really good fit. Like this is because everything you're describing, you're needing, like, can do that. I can do that, and so I've talked to the LMSWs that I supervise about this, that I think it just comes with time, being able to feel out people that you can easily converse with too. That doesn't take as much energy when you're in session. The last thing any therapist wants to do is like sit there and feel like they're pulling teeth, getting somebody to to talk. But maybe there are some therapists out there that's like their bread and butter, right? But for the most part, if you've already got a good flow in the consultation, then you already kind of have a good idea that it's gonna flow well when you're in a longer session. With helping them figure out, I think, like I said, what I thought I wanted when I was 15 years ago versus what I would look for now. I wanted to work in addiction 100%. Like that's why I got in the field. And that's not where all my energy is now. I'm not in a place where I can offer like crisis support, for example. If somebody's been in therapy for longer, at least a year, that's more of what we're looking at. If you're like virtually getting therapy, that's not something I specialize in anymore, even though it's where I've got a lot of experience. So probably what you guys answer like now or right out of school will look different than what you may say your specialty is 15 years from now, but you could just make it what you're interested in for right now. What you feel like you got experience in from your practicum, or what you feel like your supervisor is going to be able to give you a lot of, solid support in, because kind of the last thing you want to do is I really want to focus on personality disorders, and my supervisor has no idea how to support me in that. Well, if you're brand new to the field and your supervisor doesn't have that experience, then that's not going to be a great fit. So at least having some overlap where you can get good guidance. Any other questions about that?
No, I think I have a question about something else.
Yeah.
I'll wait
Yeah.
until anyone else is on top. Could you talk more about the early transition from private practice to group practice and how, because now it sounds like you have this big team, you have your pillars defined, but like, what did that initial growth look like?
Yeah, I hired 2 people initially. And I do find that it's easiest as you add folks to do that in kind of batches of like more than one person at a time, because every time you're training, it's easy to like poke holes in training.
Yes.
When you're bringing, and as time's gone by, we've got like, onboarding documents and lists of this is how I want to make sure I cross all my T's, dot all my I's to make sure I don't leave holes in the process of them onboarding. We've got training materials for them to just like go to right away. But when my first 2 LMSW started out, they didn't have that, right? So it was like a whole learning curve for all of us. And what do you want to know about it?
Well, you answered one of my questions, which was you started with LMSWs, like you weren't looking for other fully credentialed people to join your team.
Yeah, I did. Because I already had, it was part of having my supervisor status. I did interview some LCSWs as well. But I was really excited to supervise. I had some great experiences. I had a couple different supervisors. I had great experiences in a lot of ways, but I did have, being in an agency, I had that experience of feeling like I was kind of taking up their time that really needed to be used elsewhere. I don't know if you guys have experienced that in your practicums at all, but where you almost feel like you're in the way, and I'm just trying to learn here, because they were so busy that it was hard to pull them away and get questions answered. And even, we'd be in supervision and they'd get 10 calls in the middle. And so I really wanted to be able to offer a different kind of supervision to folks who are LMSWs. Like, I want you to every week come away having learned something new, because it really is meant to be like an extension of college. It's not meant to just be like we're hanging out. And I sometimes felt like it was like we're filling up the time to get to the next thing. So hopefully when you guys get a supervisor, you're not just coming in with the questions. Hopefully they're also coming in with stuff they want to teach you. That to me has been I think it's a little bit of both. And what else?
How did you start doing, like, did you just feed them clients, or were you like, you're kind of responsible for marketing yourself? Like, what did
It's
that
both.
transition?
It's
Okay.
both. That's been still an area of struggle. I think that LMSWs have a really hard time with the marketing piece. It's, it tends to be really daunting. I definitely am still offering more of the referrals, and that's something I would like to, shift over time. And I think it's a personality thing in a lot of ways, that some people have just a greater comfort in that arena than other people do. So some people, it's been easier to fill up than other people. It's been a case by case. And like I mentioned, that thing about, like, for example, the folks that when we were in Florida, that was harder for them when they had that intern word. I think that was a big deterrent. Yeah.
Well, I guess because you said a lot of the platforms that you would use to like advertise.
referrals, you
Get
have to
you
be
have to be an
licensed.
LCSW. So
Right.
yeah, so it is really just
tricky.
like internal referrals and word of mouth.
Yeah, and
LMSW?
yeah, and for them to, try and do networking. I
Mhm.
get a huge referral source for us has been other providers, not just mental health providers, psychiatrists, for example, but also like my sister is actually also, she's an LPC and she focuses on perinatal work, and she's amazing, and I'm a little biased, but she gets so many of her referrals from a lactation consultant. And then I've had a lot of referrals from a doctor's office, like a doctor's office that keeps screening people for ADHD. Oh, I have somebody in my office that can focus on ADHD, or they keep screening people for OCD, and then they refer it as, oh, I have somebody here that can help you with that. So building relationships with providers is huge.
A friend, a hairstylist who she really loves now, because everybody's like talking and she's like,
Yeah.
she's getting so many clients.
That's so
from-
funny.
Wasn't from Alabama.
That's so funny. Yeah, that's a perfect example.
On the point of kind of like group therapy and getting someone who's a great supervisor, like what, I'm curious, how do you connect, like coming out of grad school, like with a group practice owner, who you connect with and while you're getting your hours, like, going to speak from my personal experience, like I think once I graduate, I think my partner wants to move states, right? So it's like whatever the network I have in Austin, if we go move to the DC area, like it's gonna be starting from like a very blank slate. And so it seems like you move states as well. So I'm curious what your thoughts are there.
Yeah, I've always been the one starting it, so I don't know as much what it's like seeking it out, but Facebook groups are where, which is I probably so old school for you guys, if it's even old school for me, but that's where most of these the networking ends up happening for private practices. Maybe there are other, I've posted my openings for LMSWs on the UT alumni page and things like that. So like through whatever schools are in that area would be another place to look in, like for there are a bunch of great schools in DC. Yeah. So there may be a way to look at their alumni pages and see if they have postings like that, but otherwise Facebook is where I've
I would say also
out.
trying LinkedIn to see. if
Yeah,
there's, like,
yeah.
support groups
Yeah,
in,
that's a great-
different, different areas and.
yeah, I do post any openings I've posted on LinkedIn too. Yeah.
Did you get your like clinical certification? Did you get that in Texas or did you get that in
I
Florida?
got it in Florida and then I did the reciprocal licensure.
Okay, so there's reciprocal.
I had it in Wisconsin too.
And do you since you have it in both Florida and Texas and you do everything online, can you accept patients from
Mhm.
Florida?
Yeah, still the majority of my caseload is in Florida and I go back there often anyway, but yeah.
And so you have to maintain like, and this is just me coming out from afar, it's like, you have to maintain that licensure in those states with their different rules, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that's been one of the trickiest things is what I can do here versus what I can do there and what LMSWs can do in each. It's been so tricky, but it's really a lot of calls to BHEC and DOH out there, which is their version of it, but no one likes to give straight answers. So that's
No,
why
I ask, because I get a lot of those questions and I'm like, there's so, like, every state is so
every state is
different,
so
and I
different,
can't really
even the
say.
terminology.
Yeah.
And that I hope you guys will all advocate with us for the compact because it is,
So exciting.
to your point about the like conglomerate, the counseling practices,
Yeah.
I wondered how will that impact us? And I go, well, if I'm already in 2 states and that's not getting in the way, that seems gonna, it's, of course, it could still impact, but I think there's always still space for a small business, but I do think that will make it so much easier when all the rules are consistent because we're left to do so much interpretation. And that's why I highly recommend being an NASW member because you can call them directly and they will help you interpret the rules and give you some advice. I've been really grateful to have my NASW.
And that's so great for clients too, because like, like people that are in rural areas or just like from personal experience moving to New York, and I had the best therapist that was the LCSW, and I was so bummed that when I moved here, I just was like, he was like fine, it was like,
Yeah.
so just being able to like move places and keep your therapist.
I know. It's just, again, to me, that's not good client care. There are rules in different states about how many times you can keep seeing someone if they're in another state or things like that. So you can call, but you have to stay on the phone for an hour and it's such a bummer. And some states don't allow you to do it at all. And that will be huge because I do think it's coming. Do you think
I
it's
was
coming?
gonna say, when do you have any, is it like a year? We don't
So
know.
there's another like next step in the process this month.
Okay,
If you guys actually if you sign up for the emails through BHEC's website, it's great. They just within the last few months started doing these town halls and you can go on, you just sign up, whatever your question is. It's funny because I would have thought it was the other way around. They don't really like when you send questions and they want you to do it live. So you can present like the next one, I think is this Monday or maybe the next Monday, from 12 to 1:30. I want to say I can really look it up for you guys. It would be on the BHEC website.
And I think we definitely have a link to the BHEC website on the DeVito Center under all the licensure information.
Okay, great.
It actually just passed October 15th, 2024. The next one is February 18th,
Okay.
2025.
Okay, yeah.
So
Cause the
February
last
18th.
one, it didn't, there was one, I think, also in August and it didn't go well. So leadership listening hour is the 28th of October. Okay, yeah,
Oh.
so this month, yeah, that was 3 days ago. It just
28th leadership.
Yeah, the
listening?
28th,
No, that's passed yet.
that hasn't.
Today's on.
Yeah,
the-
I'm-
No, sorry, this is not for voting on the compact. This
Oh.
is just a leadership listening hour. So what they do is they'll receive all of our feedback and so, this is why it would be so great for us to, just a way for you to advocate. But it's also just a great way to ask all those nuanced questions about different states and things like that. They just started doing this. It's gonna be the third one. And otherwise you would have had to call and wait on hold for forever. And it's on this public call too. So you're like, whatever you say, it's
Yeah.
official, it's really been helpful. Yeah. I'm excited they're doing it because it's just great transparency. I'm excited. Great. Talking about the multi-state, any other questions about that piece? It is tricky. Every state does want you to just get another license and spend another $100. Okay, so we did touch on the 1099 versus W2. Anything else with that? So like the idea is that you do get to build some of those skills if you're a 1099 that you want to have at your practice later on. So what does a typical day look like? I mean, this varies completely based on what you want and how many clients you're willing. Some people rather knock out a couple long days so that they can have some shorter days or have some days off throughout the week. I typically don't schedule, I'm also running the group practice, so I don't usually schedule more than 5, maybe 6 in a day, but I'm at this point not seeing clients every day anymore like I was. But typically, if you're trying to get a full-time income, be able to cover your benefits and all of that, you're looking at like 6 sessions Monday through Thursday, and then having some admin time on a day or something, or 5 sessions a day, and then leaving a little admin time each day at the end of the day, or giving yourself a nice little break in the middle of the day if you prefer. You can base it on when you feel like you're the most focused. Like that's the cool thing is you can base when you see clients and when you think it works best with your schedule, your life. I'm now and who you get as far as referrals, that really is impacted by the hours that you're offering too. I used to see a lot of teens and I don't anymore because now my kids are in school, so I'm only seeing clients when they're in school, and that's when all the teens are in school, right? So that's something to think about too when you're setting your hours. One of the ways that I built my practice so quickly is I worked Sundays for like 5 years. People love Sunday afternoons. Yeah, that worked really well.
I imagine, I was gonna say that. I was like, Sunday probably that would be like the best time.
Yeah.
I'm so stressed out about like work or school.
And so then on any of your off time, there's scheduling and rescheduling appointments, billing and insurance claims, tracking expenses and income, like all the bookkeeping work. So I've now outsourced that as well. That's one of the things you can outsource bookkeeping. You obviously want to get some outside help for taxes if you're dealing with your own business because there's so much that you can benefit from there. You can outsource someone who specifically focuses on the insurance billing piece. You can get administrative help with the scheduling and stuff like that, but you could also just use a great technology resource that does that, like Simple Practice. So Simple Practice has it, every single one of them has its pros and cons. And you can use, we talked about AI and how that can benefit you with writing notes. For example, one of the things that we spoke about, the whole idea of the AI recording your sessions and then writing notes. I don't personally do that, but that would have to get explicit consent from your clients to be able to do that. But you can use AI in so many other ways too, to be able to make your workload a little lighter, you know, and helping you with social media posts and helping you with what you're like, you know, creating marketing materials, flyers, things like that, to be able to help you with drafting messages for any networking that you're going to do and interacting with someone. And networking is a huge part of what takes your time outside of sessions too, especially in the beginning. I would say like the thing I tell my LMSWs, how are we doing on time?
We're good.
Okay.
Yep.
The thing I tell my LMSWs is to make sure that you set aside just as much time as you want to be seeing your clients in the beginning and use all of those hours to be getting the business that you want to have, just still set it aside. And then once you have clients filling up those hours, you won't need all that time to be networking and marketing and all that stuff. And you're doing communication with your clients in between sessions, you know, somebody reaches out and some level with, you know, some version of a crisis, or if you're just checking in, following up on that referral to a dietitian or referral to this specific doctor. And then, do you guys happen to have a tissue?
There should be some napkins in the silverware. I know allergies are like.
It was the shift to the cold weather,
Yeah.
just that it does me it's usually like November, maybe it's still coming for me, but every fall and every spring when it gets warm again. And then ongoing training, that's something we forget about, especially when you're an LMS, if you don't have as much of that because you don't have as many CEU requirements. As once you get licensed, you'll have all these CEU requirements, and it can really catch up to you and be a bummer if you wait until the end of the year. So highly recommend just as you go, doing a little bit at a time. And it's such a great thing for our clients because we're constantly learning. I mean, I'm so glad you guys may roll your eyes, but I'm so glad we have CEU requirements because it keeps me accountable to make sure that I'm always learning something new for my clients. It makes me a better clinician. And I know so much more now that I think about clients I had 10 years ago. And I'm like, oh, I wish I had this tool, you know, these magic beans back then. And
That's what sorry to interrupt. That's what I was gonna say about niche. I think that's the coolest thing for somebody like me who I love like keep learning. So it's like I never want to just have one area where I'm like, this is my niche. It's like right now I want to work with that. Oh, I want to work with that. And the trainings are it's like, oh, I get to pay for these trainings because it's for my job.
yeah, so yours may be like you got into a certain like IFS or something like that could be
Yes,
what you
totally,
know, it
but
could
I'm
be more
into
your
right now.
modality
Yeah.
rather than your population or something.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, a great way to get CEU credits too is to go to conferences because you can knock those all out, like with Siesta Week, like there's, there's a lot of seminars that are offering credits.
Yeah, I'm speaking at the NASW conference next month if you guys want to come. See you there.
That's November
If any-
7th or 8th, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Are you going?
Yeah, I have to do alumni stuff there, but.
Oh, awesome. That's
Yeah.
You
no,
also get
is that-
CEUs for presenting, or you can claim CEUs for presenting in Texas. Up to 5.
Yeah, mine, yeah, it's gonna be cultural competency CEUs, and I would love
I'll
to see
leave
those.
those, yes.
Yeah. And what else do I spend time doing outside of session? Referrals in both directions. I mean, it is a part-time job once you really get things turning to take in referrals and make sure you're, you know, disseminating them amongst the team to the right person, or, you know, I'm really big on making sure that we're sending clients out of our practice with good referrals, because there is nothing that, I mean, there are a lot of things break my heart, but it really, really is devastating to hear the people who have come in and they go, I've tried this place, and nobody calls me back, and nobody, and I want to make sure that just because we can't offer what they need, say they need in-person care, that's like a higher level of care than we need, or we can offer, or they're, you know, they just came out of a hospitalization or something, then I need to make sure that they have a different type of therapy. I want to make sure that they have that's when we get to put on our case management hat, make sure that we're sending them back out on that journey with some tools instead of empty-handed. And then I spent so much time making sure that we're HIPAA compliant, because you would not believe how many private practices are not HIPAA compliant. It is wild. There's a lot to learn there. Technology has made it easier than ever, and yet it's also really easy to like skip some of those steps because it's just so easy to communicate and just jump through hoops and not have to jump through all the hoops that we need to be HIPAA compliant. Because I know it takes extra steps. But deciding on the technology you want to use, spending the money on them, shifting to different ones, that all takes time. That isn't, you're not getting paid for. So think of all those things that I just said, you're not getting paid for any of that stuff. So when we talk about people having really high self-pay rates for their sessions hourly, this is why. It's because it really is expensive, guys, to be able to pay yourself for vacation, to pay yourself for benefits, to be able to pay yourself, it took me a long time to get to a place where I really felt like I could take vacation because I felt like, oh, if I'm going to go away this weekend, I need to work extra earlier in the week so that I can do that. Because when you're working for yourself, none of that's included. So that's something else I want you guys to think about when you set your rates. Think about setting your rate, including all the days off you want to have that year, include sick days. Think about all of that when you set your amount that you really can live off of and go off of that rather than what you think people will pay. And then go off of how many hours you think you can actually work and give your clients what they deserve. Instead of just how many hours can I get in there based on how much people would be willing to pay me. That's a kind of backward way of going about it. Okay, let me just make sure there's nothing else we didn't touch on. So I'm making sure that you guys heard me about you needing to be licensed to receive funds. So I wouldn't recommend having a website for yourself as an LMSW, giving the idea that like you're receiving funds so you don't get like dinged for that. And same with insurance. We talked about you'd have to be under a supervisor to bill. Ethical concerns in a private practice. Oh my God, we could go on for another hour, but I won't. Social media, dual relationships, referrals, if it's the right referral for you versus sending them to someone else because of I live in a small town outside of Austin. And so the smaller the place you live to, the more the dual relationship thing gets tricky. But making sure referrals aren't tit for tat, that whole thing, that can all get messy, running into clients in person. Building these personal relationships with clients and then knowing that you may have to do an involuntary hospitalization or call DCF or some of those things that gets more complicated. You're the one making the decision for yourself, especially when you're licensed, obviously, but even just it being your own business versus when you're in an agency, and it kind of is easier to go, well, I have, this other person is going to make sure that I do. You have to be able to have that ethical boundary for yourself to make sure that you make those calls. Reducing frequency. This is one of those ethical dilemmas. And if I suggest that my client reduces frequency, I know I'm getting paid less. And that is my duty to my clients, make sure that they're only, I'm constantly, actually, I believe in an exposure model within, especially because I work a lot with OCD and anxiety, I'm working a lot with, we're building on your capability to handle not having therapy because you know that you are capable to handle, use these tools that we've worked on and you can do this independently. So my model is always reducing in frequency and my clients push back on that. And I understand why, because it feels safer to keep having the reassurance of coming back in a session. But it is our ethical duty to make sure that clients aren't continuing to come in just because it fills our pocketbook or because it's convenient for them. It's in their best interest to be reducing frequency long-term. They can't rely on me. Difficulty with insurance regarding diagnosing. Sometimes you don't feel like this person really has the diagnosis and insurance requires a diagnosis in order to bill, all of that can be really tricky. You get paid way less to see a couple or a family than you do individual by insurance, which is mind-boggling. Deciding whether or not to take insurance is an ethical dilemma in itself. And then some other things to think about are like record keeping requirements for audits and compliance with state laws, with HIPAA, and also what insurance wants to see versus what we learned in school to like the minimum of what we need versus insurance wants to get some additional information. So getting really familiar with that is really important. And then all the renewal licensing, multi-state things going on is huge too. Okay, well, I know we're at time. I've got so much more that I can give you guys, but that's what I got. Any other questions for